From crossing up the greatest player alive,
Iverson has Jordan. The crowd is into it. Allen shakes free, gets two!
to hitting one of the most disrespectful shots in NBA Finals history.
Iverson against Tyronn Lue. Baseline right, he backs up, he fires two ball. Got it again! He's way too good!
Allen Iverson didn't just score points, he erased your pride. You can argue who's the greatest, and you can argue who's the most skilled. But if we're talking about the hardest player to stay in front of, that conversation starts and ends with Allen Iverson.
Well, the crowd loves that. Take a look at the crossover. Mike said no. Allen said yes. The bucket, the crowd loves it.
Are you kidding me? Wow.
Posting in. He won the game. He won the game. Straight points by Iverson. Looked like he was dead in the water.
Allen Iverson makes it 103-99.
He wasn't tall, and he was not built like a tank, but once the ball was in his hands, there wasn't a defender alive who could keep him from getting to his spots. So how did a 6-foot, 165-pound point guard become the most unguardable player in NBA history? And how did his game leave a mark so deep that defenders still fear him to this day?
Who's the toughest guy you ever played against?
Allen Iverson was just really, he was a load to deal with, man.
Before he was breaking ankles in the NBA, Allen Iverson was breaking spirits on the streets of Newport News. The courts weren't pretty, you didn't just play for fun, you played for respect. Allen Iverson was small, but he was electric, his handle was a weapon, and he could thread through defenders like water slipping through your fingers. By the time he got to Bethel High School, he was more than just the best player in the gym, he was the best in his state. He would drop 30 with ease, lock up the other team's top scorer, and have the crowd on its feet before halftime. As a junior, he led Bethel to a 30-0 season, a state championship, and Virginia's Player of the Year honors. But just as his rise was becoming unstoppable, everything nearly vanished. A fight at a bowling alley turned into a nightmare. Iverson was arrested, charged as an adult, and sentenced to 15 years in prison. In the span of just a single night, the future of the most gifted guard in the country nearly disappeared. Eventually, the governor granted him clemency, but the damage was done. Most major programs wouldn't touch him, all except for one in Georgetown University. And from the moment he stepped onto campus, it was clear Iverson wasn't just another recruit, he was a force of nature. He became the first freshman to start for legendary coach John Thompson and immediately turned the Big East into his personal showcase. At Georgetown, Iverson wasn't just the quickest guard in the conference, he was its most feared defender. On one play, he hit a baseline crossover into a reverse layup that left defenders spinning. And the next, he'd strip the ball clean and be halfway down the court before the offense knew it was even gone. In just 2 seasons, he scored over 1,300 points, averaged more than 25 per game as a sophomore, and won Big East Defensive Player of the Year both years. And he carried Georgetown to the Sweet 16 and put the program back on the national stage. And by the spring of 1996, there was no debate, Allen Iverson was going #1 overall.
With the first pick in the 1996 NBA Draft, the Philadelphia 76ers select Allen Iverson from Georgetown University.
In 1996, the NBA was full of giants. 7-footers patrolled the paint, guards were built like linebackers, and then here came Allen Iverson. Standing at 6 feet tall, weighing just 165 pounds, walking into the league like it was his personal playground. And from the jump, he attacked as if every possession was a dare. On November 1st, 1996, during his debut against Milwaukee, he poured in 30 points, the most by a rookie in nearly a decade. He drove into the lane like he was 6'6", stared down veterans like he'd been there for years, and played at a speed that defenders simply couldn't match. And it was not a one-night show. By his 5th game, he dropped 35 on the Knicks, a week later was 40 against the Raptors, and by April, he clocked 50 on the Cavaliers. And then came the streak, 5 straight games of scoring 40 or more. Not even Michael Jordan done that as a rookie. But in March of that same season, Iverson didn't just make history, he made a statement. It was Sixers versus Bulls, the rookie versus the GOAT. They found themselves one-on-one at the top of the key, the crowd could feel it coming, everyone in the arena was on their feet. Iverson dribbled right, crossed back left, then snapped it back right again. Jordan bit just for a split second, and that's all Iverson needed. The young man rose up, fired the shot, and buried the jumper over the best defender of his generation. Now that shot wasn't just worth 2 points, it was a warning that the future had arrived and it was wearing number 3. And from then on, Iverson didn't just score on defenders, he embarrassed them. The speed, with the shiftiness and the unpredictability, there was no blueprint to stop him. He finished his rookie season averaging 23.5 points per game and walked away with the Rookie of the Year honors. But more importantly, he already started building the legend that would follow him for the rest of his career. The smallest man on the court was the hardest one to guard. By the time the 2001 season tipped off, Allen Iverson was already a star, but there were still questions. People said that he wasn't a winner, that he was too small to carry a team, that he'll never lead a contender. That season, he silenced every one of them. Iverson didn't just lead the league in scoring with 31 points per game, he led the Sixers to 56 wins, the best record in the East. And he did it with a roster that wasn't exactly overflowing with all-stars. While Shaq had Kobe and Duncan had David Robinson, Iverson had Eric Snow and a 34-year-old Dikembe Mutombo. But what he lacked in help, he made up for in relentlessness. He averaged over 2.5 steals a night, played through injuries that would sideline most players, and carried Philly every single game. That grit won him the league MVP, making him the shortest player in history to ever claim the award. The playoffs began with a hard-fought win over the Pacers, but in the second round, Iverson met Vince Carter and the Toronto Raptors. And that series turned into a duel of the ages. Game 2 in Philly, Iverson erupted for 54 points, hitting jumpers, floaters, and impossible layups that had the crowd roaring. 2 weeks later, back in Philly for Game 5, he did it again with 52 points, pulling the Sixers within 1 game away from the conference finals. Game 6 belonged to Vince, forcing a winner-take-all Game 7, and on that night, Iverson flipped the script. Instead of gunning for another 50-piece, he picked apart the Raptors with 16 assists, trusting his teammates to finish the job. Philly advanced, and Iverson's legend grew. Next came Ray Allen and the Milwaukee Bucks, and Iverson battled a sore hip and a swollen ankle, but still dragged the Sixers to the brink. In Game 7 at Philly, with the season on the line, he dropped 44 points with 6 assists, willing his team to the finals for the first time since 1983. And their reward was a fully loaded Lakers dynasty. Shaq was still at his peak, Kobe was locked in, and the defending champs had bulldozed through the playoffs without losing a single game. Most of the basketball world expected a sweep, but Allen Iverson had other plans. In Game 1 at Staples Center, AI showed up to take the fight to them. From the opening tip, he attacked without fear. The first possession was a hard drive right at Derek Fisher, banking it high off the glass over Shaq's outstretched arm. The next trip down was a pull-up in transition before the defense could even get set. And then a hezzy dribble at the top of the key, Rick Fox froze, and Iverson was gone. By halftime, he'd already piled up 30 points, carving up a defense that hadn't lost a game in over 2 months. The Lakers tried everything, bigger bodies to defend him, quicker guards to stay in front of him, but nothing worked. He was slipping through double teams, splitting through traps, and still finished everything through contact. And then came overtime. With the score tight, Iverson got the ball in the right wing against Tyronn Lue. A quick jab left, a cross to the right, finished with a step back. Lue recovered as best as he could, but Iverson rose anyway, drilling the jumper. And then the moment came. Lue hit the floor after contesting. Iverson stepped right over him, eyes locked straight ahead, not taunting, but sending a message. I'm still here, and I'm still unguardable. He finished that night with 48 points, hitting clutch shot after clutch shot, and handing the Lakers their only loss of the entire postseason. Now, Philly would lose that series in 5 games, but that night proved something once and for all. In a league built for giants, the smallest man on the floor could still be the most unstoppable. Now, carrying a team that far comes with a cost. AI gave everything he had to the game. Every drive into the lane meant a collision. Every finish at the rim meant getting knocked to the floor. Night after night, the smallest man on the court took the biggest hits, and somehow he always got back up. But by the time he turned 30, the years of punishment had taken their their toll. The nagging injuries piled up, and although he played through most of them, each one chipped away at the explosion that made him unguardable. And the pain wasn't just physical. The media, who'd once celebrated his fire, started framing it as a problem, and that same intensity that made him a star now became the basis for criticism. They said that he didn't practice, they said that he was selfish, they said that he was a bad teammate. And then came the press conference with the one word that would follow him for the rest of his career.
I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice.
But what most people didn't know, and what almost no one in that room cared to ask, was that Iverson had just lost his best friend. And reporters weren't asking how he was holding up, they were asking why he missed a shoot-around. It wasn't arrogance, it was grief, a man hurting in plain sight and lashing out because he felt misunderstood and underappreciated. And yet, even through all the criticism, he kept proving that he could still dominate. In 2006, at 30 years old, Iverson dropped 60 points in a game, the highest single-game total of his career. In that same season, he averaged over 33 points a night, the second-best mark he'd ever posted. But in Philadelphia, the writing was on the wall. The 76ers wanted to rebuild, but Allen Iverson still wanted to win, and the two sides were heading for a split.
We've traded Allen Iverson and Ivan McFarland to Denver for Andre Miller, Joe Smith, and 2 first-round picks.
The breakup came in December of 2006. After a decade of carrying the Sixers, Allen Iverson was traded to the Denver Nuggets. And for a moment, it felt like the perfect pairing. Iverson and a young Carmelo Anthony, 2 elite scorers, each capable of taking over a game on any given night. On paper, they were unstoppable, and sometimes it looked that way on the court too. Iverson could still blow by defenders, still create space where none existed, and Carmelo could torch you from anywhere. But the chemistry never fully clicked, the defense didn't hold up, and in the loaded Western Conference, Denver could never make a deep playoff run. And by 2008, Iverson was gone again. His next stop was in Detroit, then Memphis, and eventually one last run in Philly. Each stop was shorter than the last. The magic wasn't gone all at once, but every season, the burst was just a little bit slower, the finish at the rim was just a little bit harder. Iverson's game had always been built on speed, explosion, and athleticism, and when that gear started to fade, so did the myth. The player who once looked unguardable was suddenly mortal. Allen Iverson didn't just change how basketball was played, he changed what it could look like. Because before Iverson, the NBA had a dress code even if it wasn't written down. But AI walked in with cornrows, tattoos, and chains and dared anyone to tell him to change. And in doing that, he gave a generation of players permission to be themselves. You didn't have to be 6'8" and polished to be the face of a franchise, you could be real and raw and still dominate. And even in today's game, his fingerprints are everywhere. Stephen Curry's fearless shot making, Kyrie Irving's otherworldly handles, Ja Morant's relentless drive. They're all carrying a piece of Allen Iverson with them every time they take the floor. And small guards haven't just survived after Iverson, they have thrived. They've led the league in scoring, they've became MVPs, they have became icons. And when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2016, Iverson stood there with tears in his eyes, thanking his mother, his friends, and his fans. He had been doubted his entire life, but the answer was never about ego, it was a challenge to the league, to the critics, and to the world. And every night he stepped onto the court, he answered it the only way he knew how. By dropping 40 on your favorite team, by crossing up your favorite player, and by playing with a heart too big for his own body. Because they said he wouldn't survive in the league, but for over a decade, absolutely nobody could guard him.